Happy Saturday, crafty friends. I am thrilled to be joining the Simon Says Stamp Be Creative Blog Hop Day 2. So you'll want to check out the blog hop, of course, because there are giveaways and a really great promo, which you're going to see here in just a moment. I'll make sure that all of that information is linked in the video description below, so you'll want to definitely check that out. But I also have a video for you today using some of the brand new products from the Be Creative release. So I am using the new Fantastic Flowers stamp set and coordinating stencils. We are starting out with the stamp set, and we are going to grab an A2 size card panel that's 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches. And we are going to tape that down into our Misty stamping platform. Now, I know that there are those like sticky mats that you can use, but I'm going to be honest with you, friends. I struggle with those. I think they warp my paper. I think they leave a residue. I think they get covered in dust and dog hair, being a home with dogs. So if you have any tips for those sticky mats, let me know. But until I feel better about using those, I am just going to go ahead and tape my panels down into my Misty. So I am grabbing the Fantastic Flowers stamp set, and I am aligning the, what would those be called? The outline? Not the outline. The inside line of those beautiful leaves, because I do have the coordinating stencil for doing the ink blending. And I want to really utilize that on my card today. So I am aligning those two kind of inner, like the inside veins of those leaves. And I want to make sure that they don't overlap too much. So I am kind of using that stencil to align them. It's okay if they overlap a little bit, but I don't want them to overlap too much. And I'm just arranging those stamps in my Misty so that I can go ahead and get them stamped to my A2 sized card panel. Once I have them aligned, we're going to prep that cardstock panel with some anti-static powder. This will just make sure that when I go to apply the embossing powder, that it mostly just sticks to that embossing ink. So once I've applied the anti-static powder tool, I am going to ink up the stamps with some embossing ink. Today I'm using the Wow embossing pad. You can use any embossing ink that you prefer. This is just my preferred embossing ink. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my panel with the veins of those two kind of larger leafy images. I'm using my stamp press tool from Pink Fresh Studio. It's one of my favorite tools. I'm a light stamper, so it really does help me get a good impression. So with the stamping done, we're going to go ahead and cover our stamped panel in embossing powder. I am using the Gilded Embossing Powder from Brutus Monroe. This is just a really lovely shade of gold. It's my favorite shade of gold, but you can really use whatever embossing powder you prefer or have on hand for this panel. It will work perfectly. So once we have stamped and covered with the embossing powder, we're going to go ahead and heat set it with our heat tool. I'm using the Wow Dual, I think it's called like the Dual Heat Embossing, heat gun. There's two settings. There's a low and a high. I'm going to be honest, I mostly just use the high because I mostly just use it for heat embossing, which does require the high. But I do like having the lower setting because that's really great for watercolor and setting stuff like that. So while I don't use the lower setting all that much, it is really nice. It is a really nice feature to have. So I have finished the heat embossing. We've got that lovely shade of gold. I never know if my video actually captures the gold very well, but it is really lovely. The Brutus Monroe Gilded is my favorite gold embossing powder. So now I am lining up that Fantastic Flowers stencil. We're going to start with the top leafy piece. So I am just taking my time to really line it up with the veins that you see there. What I have found is if you actually line it up at the bottom first and then kind of just make and then line it up at the top just by moving the stencil. That makes it pretty easy. And then we'll go ahead and we'll tape that stencil down in place so we don't have to worry about it moving. And then we're going to also add some Post-it tape in place to kind of mask off the rest of the stencil. This is a one-piece stencil. It has all of the different elements, but I really want to just focus on that one leaf. So I don't want the other elements to ink blend in on my panel. So you can just really super easily mask that off. I'm using Post-it tape, but you can use whatever you want. And now I'm going to use Pink Fresh Studio inks to ink blend my leaves in. I am going with the rainbow gradient today, but you can absolutely do whatever you would like in terms of this. I did notice there is a little piece of cardstock sticking out that I want to make sure does not get any ink on it. So I grabbed a piece of tape, we cover that up, and now we are back to ink blending in the shade of red. So my rainbow gradient goes from pink to aqua. I stop at aqua, so unfortunately I didn't get purple in this gradient, but that's okay. I am using Pink Fresh Studio inks today. We started with bubblegum, and then we went to Berrylicious, which is our red, and then we are going to end this leafy panel with Clementine, which is a really lovely shade of orange. So this first leaf, the kind of bigger leaf that we have going on, is our first gradient, ranging from pink to orange. So you're going to see how fun this ended up. You've got that nice gold embossed line, and then you've got this lovely leaf that ranges from the pink to orange gradient. So now we're going to go ahead. I went ahead off camera. I cleaned that stencil off. And now we are lining up the other leafy element from the stencil with the leaf veins that we heat embossed. So I did it the same as I did that first piece. So I lined it up more at the bottom, kind of adjusted the top until I felt like it was correct. And then I'm going ahead and I am taping it down to my surface. I'm grabbing some Post-it tape to mask off the pieces that I do not want to stencil. So you may notice there are some other really adorable little flowers included on the stencil set. I've masked those off because obviously I was focusing on the leaves. But there is a die set for this set that I don't have. So those would be really great for ink blending and then die cutting, and you could pop them up as little accents. But because I don't have the die set, I am focusing on just these leafy pieces. So we're starting our ink blending here with yellow. It's the next shade in that rainbow gradient. This is Sunshine from Pink Fresh Studio. And then we're going to go in with some green. We're using key lime here. And then we'll finish out our rainbow gradient with an aqua. I chose Mermaid Cove, which we haven't quite gotten to yet. But that's going to finish out my gradient. So the rainbow gradient does not include purple because I just didn't have the room. So I'm ending it at the aquas. Actually kind of like that rainbow gradient without the purples. Not to say the purple isn't fantastic, it is. But when you don't have room, it's okay to leave it off. And your rainbow gradient is going to be just as fabulous. So we've finished our rainbow gradient. Let's pull that stencil off. And here is our lovely rainbow gradient panel. So let's go ahead, grab that panel, and we're going to put it back into a stamping platform. And we are going to stamp our sentiment. So this is from the new Big and Bold 2 sentiments. This is a fantastic sentiment set. Now there is a die set which I don't currently have, so I'm going to go ahead and stamp the sentiment, directly to the panel. But if you have the die set, you could stamp this on a scrap piece of cardstock or something along those lines, die cut it, and pop it up on your panel. But because I currently don't have the dies, I'm just going to go ahead and stamp it directly to my panel with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Now this is a pretty chunky sentiment, And as I mentioned earlier in the video, I'm a bit of a light stamper. So I get a pretty good impression the first time around, but there are a couple of little splotchy marks because I am a little bit of a light stamper and it is a little bit of a chunky sentiment. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stamp it for a second time to just get a little bit better of a stamp impression. And after I stamp it that second time, it's perfect. It's nice and crisp. It's bold. It is such a fun sentiment stamp set. It's a great one. It's got so many great sentiments. I think it's definitely going to be a must-have in your stamping suite of products. So now we've got the panel finished. It is time to start assembling our card. So I've created a full panel of foam adhesive. I've just used some white craft foam and 5-inch score tape to create my own little DIY panel of foam. I've added it to the back of that stamped panel. Now we're going to go ahead and adhere it down to an aqua colored A2 sized card base. I did forget to mention off camera, I did die cut that panel with a stitched rectangle die that is sized at 4 by 5.25. So we've got that all assembled. Now I'm going to accent the card with just a rainbow gradient of these really lovely crystals. I have just created a rainbow gradient line of crystals in 2 corners of the card, and I am adhering them down with a little bit of liquid glue. I'm using Barely Arts glue. It's my favorite liquid glue. You can really use whatever liquid glue you have on hand as long as it dries clear. That's the most important part. These crystals are beautiful, but you definitely want that adhesive that's underneath to dry clear so they kind of have that sparkling feel to it. So that is my card for the Simon Says stamp Be Creative. Blog Hop Day 2. I hope you enjoyed watching the process of this card coming together. Don't forget that there is a blog hop going on with prizes. You'll definitely want to check that out. My blog hop post, is linked in the video description below. So you'll want to check that out. There's a great promo going on. You can get this freebie handcrafted with love 3x4 stamp set for free with any purchase. Just make sure you use the code that's in that graphic, and that will also be in my blog post. Well, that is everything that I have to share with you today, friends. Thank you so much for checking out my video. Be sure to check out the blog hop post. And other than that, have a great day.